Welcome to Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. I'm your host, Karen Seltz, and I'm so excited to broach this amazing topic with you. It's, are you choosing love or fear, or are you listening to the voice of love or fear? Same thing, right? So, A Course in Miracles, which is a metaphysical book, and The Way of Mastery both say it is not necessary to seek for love. It is only necessary to seek for what isn't love, because love is who we are. It's who we are as our divine, precious, perfect beings. And everything else, the fear voices, the ego voices, are things that we have added, that we've put between us and love, or us and the divine, us and God. So tonight we're going to talk about how these things surface, what kinds of questions we get to ask ourselves, because in order to, in Course in Miracles, they call it purify your mind. But in order to really get clear about who you are and to remember the truth of who you are on a more regular basis, to shorten the time span where you forget, you get to be vigilant. You get to start watching for the tricks the ego plays on us, and they are vast, they are many, they are varied. And kind of like addiction, the ego is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And we get to be wise to it. We get to say, I see you, ego, nice try, not today. And we get to play. So if you are ready, let's go. I'm so excited. So I think about often the biggest trick that the ego uses to subdue our minds or to capture our attention is fear. And fear can look like so many different things. It can look like distraction, procrastination, anger, irritation, frustration, annoyance, depression, shame, guilt, comparison. I mean, there's so many different forms that it takes. And here's one that I just recently became aware of. It's not, well, it could be a form of fear, but it's a tactic that the ego uses to kind of get us to put our guard down. And that is flattery. And I'm reading this book right now that I absolutely love. One moment, Lola, lie down, please. Lie down. My dog's going crazy. She doesn't know that it's showtime. Lola, lie down. And of course, her toenails are super loud. All right. So flattery. It's one of the ways that is described in this book that I'm reading called Outwitting the Devil, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. It is a book that has literally changed my life, and I'm only halfway through. It has allowed me to see things from a much higher perspective and to see them clearly, like to take my blinders off. And it was written in 1938 by Napoleon Hill, the gentleman who wrote Think and Grow Rich. And he's talking about things like frequency and energy. And one of the tactics the ego, or in this book, he calls it the devil, uses to subdue our minds is cigarettes, getting people addicted to cigarettes because it numbs their brains and prevents them from thinking clearly. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is before we really knew that cigarettes were dangerous or addictive. So I love this book. Couldn't recommend it higher than I do. It's amazing. So that having been said, flattery is one of the ways that the ego, or any negative force that you believe in, uses to kind of play with us, to get us on its side so that we are putty in its hands. So don't fall for it. I mean, I'm not saying don't receive a compliment. Yes, receive the compliment, feel good about yourself, but take it with a grain of salt, right? Like, don't get too full of yourself, because then you are likely to fall down that slippery slope. So I digress. I'm getting back to the topic of love or fear. Some of the questions that I love to ask are simple, because the ego never, ever questions itself. So the second you start questioning it, it's going to fall apart. You're going to see it for what it is. However, it takes some discipline to not believe it, to not believe that voice in our head, because beliefs, remember, they're just thoughts that you continue to think over and over and over until you no longer think them. They're just there. They're part of your fabric. They're part of the hardware. They're not the software program anymore. They're the hardware. They're in there. So you get to start questioning and playing. So one question is like, where am I fooling myself? Or what have I not wanted to see up until now? What have I not been willing to look at? An example of that is if you ask any couple that's divorcing because of infidelity, let's say on the man's part, and you ask the woman, did some part of you know that your husband was cheating on you? They will almost 100% of the time say, yep, there was some part of me that knew. I just didn't want to believe it. So I chose to look the other way. I chose to ignore all the evidence. So it's like that. Like, what in your life have you not been willing to look at or not wanted to see? So you chose to look the other way. Could be with your kids. Like maybe your kids are doing drugs or having sex and you're like, no, not my child. My child would never do that. Or maybe your kid is a bully and you just don't want to believe that. So you choose to look the other direction. And if people even tell you, you're like, no, that can't be true. Which is also like, where am I in denial? Now, as a former addict, oh my gosh, denial, I was the queen of, right? The queen of denial, completely. So many things. And every time something else would surface as a truth, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's more. I thought I was done with all the denial, but there's always more. And I believe our subconscious mind tries to protect us from some things, and we can only handle so much at a time. I mean, if you realized all the things you were doing all at once, that'd be a bit overwhelming because, 95% of everything you think, feel, believe, and do is subconscious. You have no idea that you're doing it, believing it, feeling it. It's just under the surface. So a big part of our journey of remembering the truth of who we are and coming back to center, coming back to love, is removing everything that we've put there over the course of the years, or that's been put there and we said, okay, yeah, you can put your crap on me. It's just taking it off piece by piece and being gentle with ourselves. Like, oh, honey, I know it hurts to see that, your husband's been cheating on you for 20 years and you've known it all along, but you didn't want to admit it. It sucks. It sucks for you. And now you see it and you can make a choice. You can choose to stay and you'll be just as lovable, or you can choose something else. I mean, it's not just two choices. That's another tactic of the ego, thinking you only have two choices. We live in an infinite, abundant universe. There are unlimited potentials for everything. We have so many possibilities available to us. And the ego uses the tactic of black and white, left and right. Like you only have two choices. You either leave your husband who's cheating or you stay and allow him to keep doing it. Well, there are a zillion other choices. You get to be open to them. And when you invite God in, you just say, God, come on in, take the wheel. I know that I haven't been letting you in. I've been controlling. I've been driving my own bus and it's going off a cliff. Come on in. I need you. Help me. I mean, it can be that simple. Like you get desperate enough, you fall to your knees and you just say, help me. I can't do it anymore. God will help you. God will be there. Now it's the cat's turn. All right, go on, Hagrid. It's pet hour. So those questions like, where am I fooling myself? What have I been ignoring? What have I been pretending not to know? Some other ones. Okay, where am I committed to having a certain image in the world? And that one is, what masks are you wearing? I used to wear the mask of funny. I thought it was the mask of confidence. I don't think it is now. I think it was a mask of, I'm so uncomfortable with myself, I'm going to pretend to be confident. And I think everybody saw through it. But I thought I was portraying this confident, strong persona. And I was scared to death. I wouldn't, if somebody said something serious, I would be the first one to make a joke because I was so uncomfortable. That was one of my masks. So where are you committed to a certain image that you have? Whether it's pretending you're not afraid of anything. I used to do that too. I used to pretend like I wasn't afraid of anything. And in public, I was like brave and I would take all the dares. Well, I was afraid of being seen. I was afraid of being authentic. I was afraid of being vulnerable. I was afraid that if people really knew me, that nobody would love me. Nobody would want to be my friend. I would die alone. Now, I did not have the courage or the skills to communicate that. I'm talking like back in high school and in my 20s, but now I do. And it no longer runs me. I no longer believe those things. I believe there are plenty of people that have the capacity to love me with all the crappy things I've done in my life. It just makes me part of, I mean, it just makes me human and it makes me relatable. Yeah, I've done a lot of crappy things. And I am more connected to love and who I am as a being of light and love than I've ever been. The more that I allow those things to just be experiences I've had, choices I've made. And I'm not even going to say mistakes because they've brought me to this point. And without all those choices, I would not have the level of compassion and understanding and acceptance of others that I do. So it's counterintuitive. Like I always thought if I accept those things about myself and I allow people to see them, they're going to see like what a crappy human I am and how unlovable I am. And I thought that would take me further from God and from who I am, but it didn't. It brought me closer because it was truth. It was truth. Those are just things I did. It didn't mean that's who I was. Those things don't define me and they don't define you. So whatever you've done that you have shame or guilt around, just hug yourself, hug that part of yourself and say, I know you did the best you could. And I know like if you could have done it better, you would have. You would have. I trust that about you because we are all inherently good. It's not the other way around. We are inherently good. We were born perfect and precious and in the image of God. We were not born sinners. That's a load of crap. It's a load of crap. And I'm sorry if it steps on your toes, but I refuse to believe that a perfect, precious little baby is a sinner. Sin for me means to miss the mark, to fall short, to forget the truth of who you are. It's not like a bad deed or like you did something. All right. So here's another big one. Where have you been committed to driving your own bus, to taking that wheel and gripping it tight and like saying, nope, I got it, God, I got this, because you didn't trust that God really loved you or God would really be there for you because maybe nobody else has been in your life. Maybe you learned from a young age you had to be self-reliant, that other people were not going to come through for you. Well, God's not a person. God is every person, but God's an energy. God is within all of us, and we all have access to the same amount of godliness, to the same amount of divinity, to the same number and level of miracles. So if you've ever witnessed a miracle or seen a video testimonial of a miracle, know that that's possible for you and through you. Yes, for you and through you. You are a conduit for God. You are a conduit for love. You are a conduit for truth. We all are. We are barely scratched the surface of what our abilities are. And I think we see so little. We experience life through our senses, and there's so much more. There's so much more. And we believe everything that our senses tell us. And if you believe in anything spiritual at all, you'll know that we identify with this realm here that we see, feel, taste, touch, and smell, and that it's all an illusion. If you ask any 10 people, they're all going to have a different experience of the exact same event that everyone experienced. And we know that all events are neutral. We are the meaning makers. We're the ones that say, oh, this was bad. This was good. This was exciting. This was fun. Now, I love roller coasters. I think they're exhilarating and so much fun. If you ask 10 people, how many of them are going to say, that's the scariest thing I could possibly imagine? I would never want to do that. And for me, it's like on my top 10 list. Like, I love roller coasters. We all have a different experience of that neutral event. We all have a different meaning of it. For some of us, it's like a hell yes. For some of us, it's a hell no. No way. You couldn't pay me enough to go on a roller coaster. I happen to love it. And now I'm excited. I want to go on one. I'm going to digress because I love to talk about fun things. And there are some Instagram reels, and they do roller coasters around the world. And I found one that's nearby. It's only one state away. So I'm going to go there this summer, I think, with my daughter from Colorado. So I'm excited about that. Roller coasters. All right. More questions. Where have I been lying to myself or others? Where have I been lying to myself or others? And that could be even wearing a mask, like pretending that you like somebody, pretending you want to get together with them, pretending you're happy to do things for them. It could be pretending you're happy in general when you're miserable inside. It could be anything. Also, it's really fascinating. I did this program called Real Love, and they considered lying to be when you only showed like one side of yourself, or if you put on, like, you had to make sure you had your hair and makeup done to present yourself a certain way. They consider that lying. I find that fascinating because it's, well, really, it's not authentic when I have all this on. I look completely different than when I do hot yoga. And if you're in my life, you get to see both. Lucky you. So think about that. Like, where are you lying to yourself and where are you lying to others? Like, another thing with looks, I grew up in a household where my mom would say things like, are you going out of the house like that? Which meant like, you don't look acceptable, right? Or you really need to lose some weight. Like, she told me that a lot, a lot. Things that I told myself were, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable unless I look perfect. And that one has been, it took me a long time to overcome that. Now I'm finally to the point where I will go out of the house without makeup on. And I think it's because I do hot yoga so much. So I have to, or else I would look like Alice Cooper. I would have like the stuff running down my face. So another question is, where am I looking outside of myself? And that could be for validation. It could be for approval, could be for love, pleasure, all those things. You know, we think sometimes we allow other people to define us, like to say, okay, you're okay here. And it starts in childhood where we need that. We need that validation, that mirroring from our parents. Like, am I okay if I do this? And a lot of parents are doing their best and they're shaping you in their image. And we don't learn to think for ourselves. We don't learn to trust ourselves and our intuition and our gut, because we are not our parents. No matter how hard they tried, we're still us. We're individuals. We don't think the way they do. We don't believe what they believe exactly. And it's so inauthentic and it doesn't feel good. It's out of alignment for us to pretend. And yet we have to in many cases, or else there's punishment, right? In my house, it was physical punishment, or it could be withholding of love. And that was really painful. So we did what we could to survive. And now we get to start thinking for ourselves. And we get to start asking, hey, what do I really want? What do I desire? Like, another way that we lie to ourselves is being okay with the status quo and not going for our dreams, pretending like they don't matter. And I did that for so many years and I was miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was addicted. I had no self-esteem because I really didn't think what I wanted mattered that much. So I didn't go for it because I was afraid and I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think my role in the world mattered. I didn't think I brought that much value to the world. And now I really see that we all have unique and immeasurable value. Like nobody else is like you. There's no one else on this whole earth that is exactly like you or that was put here for the same purpose as you. So we get to develop our God-given gifts. And I believe the way we do that is we follow the thread of desire. Like, what do I really want? What is calling to me to be, to do? And sometimes it makes no sense. Logically, it probably will make no sense. But if you have that calling and you keep ignoring it, a lot of times it gets louder and louder and louder until you can't ignore it. And then a lot of times people will cut and run. They just like leave everything and start a life in the circus. Not really, but you know what I mean? Like they just do something totally out of character because they've been pretending to be somebody else for so long. So I'm not saying do that. Don't do that. Just answer the call. Listen. Put one foot in front of the other. Take one next step that leads you closer and closer to your purpose and to your divinity, because you're going to feel it. You will feel expansive. Even when you're scared to do something new, there's a difference. So start to notice when it's like a dread feeling with the fear, then that's not a yes. But if it's a, I'm so scared and excited, and yes, I get to press record or I get to jump off this building. You know, I'm saying if you're supported. All right, here's a good one. For those of us women who identify as controllers, like we try to control people because we're smart and we know what's best for them, of course. Where are you demanding that the world be like you say it should be, or the way you want it, or the people in your life, in your relationships, your spouse, your loved ones, your children, your friends? Where are you demanding that they be like you or do it the way you want it done? And not allowing people to express themselves and be who they really are. Because also you're cutting off the opportunity for people to surprise you and to show up for you. Because even if they meet your standard at the very, very best, you are not disappointed. Now, do you want to go through life being not disappointed? Or do you want to go through life being joyful and elated and excited and grateful? Yes, you get to choose, nobody else. I want to read something to you from The Way of Mastery because it sums up all this. And it says to ask yourself this frequently, or to say this to yourself frequently. I abide in the perfection of a loving universe. Think about that. Like I live in a perfect and loving universe is what that means to me. And just remembering that, because some people say, oh, the world is messed up or it's scary or it's evil. No, I abide in the perfection, like it can't be any better, of a loving universe. Nothing can occur by accident. Nothing can occur by accident. You are orchestrating a lot of it. It doesn't say that, but I do. Where I am in this moment must be the perfect place for me to be. So just know that you are in the perfect place. You could be nowhere else. How can I find the doorway to stillness within now? How can I find the doorness to the stillness within me right now? So you're just asking, God, like, quiet my mind, quiet my monkey mind, and help me to find the doorway to my stillness, which is also the doorway to your divinity, because you can't hear the voice of God through all the chatter of the ego, because the ego speaks first and speaks loudest. So you get to quiet your mind every single day. Where within me can I rest in peace and ask the Holy Spirit's guidance? Where in this moment am I clinging to another or to a thing? Now that means looking outside yourself, like, oh, if I have this car, I'll be happy. If I have that job, I'll be happy. If my bank account is this amount, I'll be happy. If that person loves me, I know I'm worthy. So anything outside of yourself, they call it in this book a substitute for God. And when you have those, when you're relying on another person for your happiness, for example, and you hear it in our culture all the time, oh, he makes me so happy. No, he doesn't make you happy. If he does, you're on the hook. And he could be taken away like that physically. Now, it also is going to go on and talk about love, how love can never be taken away. Where am I looking upon another person or another thing in this universe and claiming it as my possession? Woo. I want to read one more paragraph because this is so good. For what you do not give to be shared, that you say you have loved, rest assured, beloved friend, in that moment, you are in the viciousness of specialness. There's a whole thing about specialness. If it's not explained, I'll explain it. So that means if you're not willing to share a thing or a person, you are holding that thing as special instead of holy. The egoic mind believes that if it shares what it has, it loses. The egoic mind, the ego, believes if it shares what it has, it loses. So it's like a lot of people that identify with lack in money. Like if I give this much money away, I won't have as much. Or if I ask for that much money from my job, it'll be less for someone else. And it doesn't work that way. There's plenty for everyone. Same with love. Therefore, in your world, when you perceive that someone or something has brought you a great source of comfort and love and even security, to see that being shared elsewhere activates the fear of loss within the ego. So specialness is when you think you're lacking something and you see something or someone outside of you and you're like, oh, that person can give me that thing that I need. Companionship, love, joy, passion, sex. I mean, it could be anything, right? And only that person. Then we start thinking only that person. And we make that person responsible for our happiness. And that's a lot to put on anybody. Whereas a holy relationship is defined as two people that are whole, come together. They're lacking absolutely nothing. And they come together to bring joy and love, to extend love to another person. They don't need anything. They don't want anything. They don't expect anything. Now, I'm not saying don't have boundaries. That's a whole nother story. But when you go to a relationship whole, you don't need that person to complete you or to fulfill you. You're a whole person. Think of how good that feels. If somebody comes to you and they're like, I'm whole and I'm here because I want to be. I am here to extend love to you. Now, what if two people do that? They're whole people. They're coming together. What a powerful way to begin a relationship. Extending love, not saying, what can I get from you? What can you give me? I gave you this, now you owe me. It's not a debit and credit situation. It's like both parties are extending. And when you're giving love, you're receiving. Giving is receiving when it's truly given with no expectations. So play with that. I think in romantic relationships, it is the best playground. It is the best place to see the parts of yourself that are ready to be healed, because that person will mirror the stuff that you think is unlovable in you, and it will be right in your face, and you'll think it's the other person, but it's you. So play with it. If your mate or your boyfriend, spouse annoys you, start playing like, where's that me? Where am I like this? Or where was I like this and I rejected it? Where do I want to be like this, but I'm afraid it'll make me unlovable? Just start playing with it. Just start questioning and asking the questions. I hope this served you. And we get to start questioning the voice of the ego, and everything that we believe, start to question it. Because the more you think for yourself, the closer you are to God, and the more open your heart will be. And I am all for a world where we're all living from our hearts and thinking clearly as the divine, because that's who you are. I love you so much. Thank you for watching Irresistible You, Ignite Your Passion and Purpose. I'll see you right here next week.